Is your Microsoft Power Automate flow succeeding, but you're just not getting the results you expected? In this Power Automate tutorial, I'll explore 5 frequently asked questions that pop up when troubleshooting a flow. If you'd like to level up your Power Automate flow skills, keep watching. Why does my condition return false when it's supposed to be true? Whenever I use condition actions in my flows, I always use compose actions to store any dynamic content I use in the condition. This way, I can verify the output of the dynamic content to ensure the values in my condition are a match. In this example, I'm using a condition action to check if the current SharePoint item is confirmed. The confirmed column in my SharePoint list is a yes/no column. I've added the dynamic content of the column to this compose action. Although you might think a yes or no value is stored, it's actually true or false. By confirming this with the compose action, I can ensure that I insert the appropriate value in the second value field. Another reason your condition action returns false is because of case sensitivity issues. In this example, I'm checking to see if the name of an attachment contains the word contract. However, by entering the string with a capital C, it'll only return true if the attachment name has a capital C. To avoid any case sensitivity issues, I'll use an expression to convert the attachment name to lowercase. Use the toLower function. By adding an expression, the attachment name dynamic content is no longer listed in the dynamic content list. Add the dynamic content back into the condition action. Hover over the dynamic content label and take note of the dynamic content key. The dynamic content key is the text between the single quote marks. Remove the dynamic content and insert an expression. Use the item function and add a question mark, square brackets, and single quotes. Enter the dynamic content key between the single quotes. In this case, it's name with a lowercase n. In the second value field, I'll adjust the string of text so that it's in lowercase. Now when I test the flow, it returns true. Why can't I select or find dynamic content in my flow actions? Most times when you try to access dynamic content to insert into an expression, the only options available to select from are body and value. To get around this, insert the dynamic content you'd like to use in your expression into the action. Click on the 3 dots and select Peak Code. Locate the dynamic content you'd like to use in your expression. In this case, it's the contract renewal date. Highlight the dynamic content expression, which is the text after the @ symbol and before the closing double quote marks. Copy this to your clipboard. Delete the dynamic content label and insert an expression. Paste the content from your clipboard into the expression. Why isn't my apply to each action looping through my items? The reason your apply to each action isn't looping through your items is because there aren't any items to loop through. Whenever I use an action that returns multiple items, especially when I'm using a filter query, I always include a compose action after to output the number of items returned. In the compose action, insert an expression and use the length function. Click on the dynamic content tab and insert the value dynamic content from the action above. I do this even before I bother adding an apply to each action. This helps me to confirm that my filter query is working before I continue building my flow. If the compose action returns 0, I can make adjustments to my filter query until it returns the appropriate number of items. In addition to adding a compose action, I also include a condition to check if any items have returned before continuing on with the flow. Why isn't my filter query working? While we're on the topic of filter queries, let's cover a few common reasons your filter query isn't working. The main reason is that you are using the wrong value in your query. I just showed you that you need to use a true or false value when using a condition on a yes/no column in SharePoint. However, the same isn't true for when you are using a yes/no column in a filter query. If you are trying to use the true expression, you'll get an error. If you try to use a string of text, you'll return nothing. What you need to use is a number, 1 for yes and 0 for no. The more complex your query, the greater room for error. This is particularly true for filtering items by dates and times. Rather than directly inserting date-time expressions into the filter query field, it's better to use a compose action first. This step can help you confirm that the output of the dates and times are what you were expecting. You can tweak your expressions and quickly run tests without needing to run the action that gets your items, which will save you a ton of time. In this flow example, I'd like to return files that have been modified in the last 3 days. Since the modified column in SharePoint stores a timestamp, my filter query will need to include a timestamp as well. We'll need to dynamically generate a timestamp that represents 12 a.m. from 3 days ago. Whenever you are using dates and times in your flows, it's best practice to use the convert time zone action. I'll use the convert time zone action to convert the current timestamp returned with the UTC-now function to my local time zone. For the format string, select round trip. Add a compose action. Insert an expression. Use the add days function. The add days function takes 3 parameters: the original date, number of days to add or remove, and a date format. The last parameter is optional. Switch to the Dynamic Content tab. Make sure your cursor is in between the parentheses. Locate the converted time dynamic content and insert it into the expression. Add a comma after the dynamic content and insert a positive number to add days or a negative number to subtract days. In my case, I'll insert a -3 to subtract 3 days. To convert this date into a timestamp, we'll need to wrap this entire expression with the format datetime function. Place your cursor at the start of the expression by pressing the up arrow key and type in format datetime with an opening parenthesis. Go to the end of the expression by pressing the down arrow key. Add a comma and single quotes. Between the single quotes, type a date format, capital T, and a time in 24-hour format. In my case, it'll be this. Press the down or right arrow key to go to the end of the expression and add a closing parenthesis. Adjust this expression to suit your needs. If you find yourself using dynamic dates in your flows often, I'd recommend inserting a scope action to help you group these actions together. Scope actions help keep my flows organized, and I can quickly copy the scope action from this flow to another without needing to rewrite the expression. I may only need to adjust the days that need to be added or subtracted. I'll delete this action for now and run a test to verify the outputs of the actions above. In the filter query field, compose a filter query expression by inserting the dynamic content. Don't forget to add a compose action to store the number of items returned to help with troubleshooting. Why am I receiving multiple emails or Teams messages? My first tip is that whenever you are using a send an email V2 or a Teams post action, always insert your email address into the recipient field to avoid sending multiple emails or notifications to users before you've had a chance to test out your flow. In this flow, I'm using the send an email V2 action to send a happy birthday email to an employee based on a date column in a SharePoint list. If you're interested in learning how to build this flow, check out this tutorial. I've used the compose action to store the email address of the employee that will be receiving the email. However, while I'm building and testing the flow, I'll insert my email address in the recipient field. Personally, I like to include a line in the email body to confirm who the email will be sent to once I'm done building and testing my flow. This helps me to ensure that the recipient is receiving the correct email content. Once I've confirmed the flow works, I remove the line from the email body and replace my email address with the output from the compose action. A common reason you are receiving multiple emails or Teams messages is the placement of your action. If your action is placed inside an apply to each action, you need to look at what your apply to each action is looping through. In some cases, the action belongs inside the apply to each action. However, in other cases, it needs to be pulled outside of the apply to each action. In this example, I'm looping through all the files returned from the Get Files Properties Only action. I'd like this flow to send an email with all files from this folder as attachments. This apply to each action is looping through each file returned. If I nest the send an email action inside the apply to each action, it would send a single email for every file the apply to each action loops through. Instead, to send a single email with all attachments, the send an email action needs to be pulled outside of the apply to each action. The apply to each action collects the files into this array and sends a single email with all files attached. What are your troubleshooting tips when building flows? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful and plan to use these tips the next time you build a flow, please consider giving this video a like. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on my video about failed flow fixes. Till then, if you're new to Power Automate, check out this video that covers 5 things you need to know when building a flow. Thanks for watching!